I had mentally categorized the Browns under teams I would return to once the more pressing issues were resolved, because they had spent so much of the previous 2 years engulfed in the Deshaun Watson situation and the gravitational pull of everything surrounding it. That was the strategy. Then, as I sat down to watch the minicamp footage, something happened that I would like to be specific about, because it is rare when you are sifting through early off-season footage from a dozen different facilities. Mid-rep, I paused, rewound, and watched it once more. After that, I ignored everything else and focused solely on Cleveland for the next 2 hours. Not because a single play required it, but rather because the accumulation of information throughout those sessions gave me an impression that I was unable to ignore. This was not well-packaged advertising material that was distributed via a media cycle. Beneath the surface of individual player moments, something with internal organizational logic and coherent intention was being genuinely put together. And when I was done, I was sitting with an idea that I had not anticipated having when I started the session. Baltimore may not be the most significant story in the AFC North at the moment. Perhaps it's not in Cincinnati. One practice rep at a time, it may be being written in Berea, Ohio. Allow me to describe exactly what I witnessed. The majority of coverage of minicamp footage, in my opinion, misrepresents the epistemology in one of 2 ways, so I want to start by establishing the proper interpretive frame. It either exaggerates controlled walkthroughs into conclusive assessments of NFL readiness, or brushes them off as pointless content filler that doesn't merit careful examination. The real point is missed by both answers. Shorts and helmets. There is no live pass rush. There isn't a defensive back vying for a roster spot with the kind of genuine desperation that truly tests a receiver's focus at the top of a route when his hands are most important. Anyone who gives you definitive conclusions about your NFL readiness based on 3 days of padless work is providing you with something that the environment is fundamentally incapable of producing. That is accurate. This is what minicamp does, however, disclose with a remarkable degree of candor. It makes the invisible work visible. Before any cameras were in operation, months of private preparation took place in vacant facilities. Since true preparedness is evident in the first rep and every subsequent rep, that type of preparation announces itself on day 1 with a clarity that is nearly impossible to conceal. And I couldn't stop observing it this week in Cleveland. By the way, I'm making every effort to compile as much information as I can and provide it to you. Please leave your likes and comments if you're as passionate about the Browns as I am. I am convinced that this year, we will be performing at the Super Bowl. Additionally, I would be grateful if you subscribed. Let's go on. I'll start with Denzel Boston, because there is a significant enough discrepancy between what the video actually depicted and what the majority of national coverage has analytically assigned to him to make it a real issue that needs to be fixed. You are immediately struck by the physical profile. Long and big, he occupies the outside receiver position with a kind of commanding physical authority that this Cleveland offense has been subtly lacking for so long that most observers no longer recognize it as a structural limitation. Instead of being a recognizable issue with a recognizable solution, it has evolved into ambient noise, an acknowledged limit on what this offense can be. As soon as the first clip went viral, Josh Gordon comparisons started to surface, and I can see why. Instead of just running routes, a boundary receiver physically commands them. Rather than settling into comfortable, reactive postures against a receiver they do not truly fear, a perimeter target forces defensive coordinators to commit actual coverage resources. Boston's physical profile directly addresses that particular presence, which has been missing from the architecture of this offense for years. However, the physical description is not the story, so I need you to stay with me. The story is found in the roots. The majority of the coverage I've seen discusses Boston's route running during those minicamp sessions in a single sentence. It's worthy of much more. During those competitive times, he was not winning by sheer physical superiority. In contrast to how a player who is still learning what the position essentially requires would approach the issue, he was not using his frame to create separation. He was displaying route intelligence, which has no business being developed this early in a professional career, at an early developmental stage where his technical construction is still obviously in progress. Instead of rushing to regain positional leverage after a defensive back had already processed his movement, He was building it prior to his breaks. Early in a session, he was developing tendencies in his release patterns, and later in the session, he executed cuts that directly contradicted the coverage he had been demonstrating all morning. The real distinction between a receiver who has truly internalized what professional football demands and an athletic profile still in the early stages of learning what the position actually entails is what he was doing with his pre-snap reads and in-route adjustments. After 3 days of coaching sessions, route sophistication at that level does not show up in a professional evaluation. It is built through months of intentional private work, vacant training facilities, one-on-one coaching relationships, and repetition after repetition in environments where the player's honest accounting of what his opportunity requires is the only reward and nothing is being filmed. Because true preparation is always visible on day one, Boston entered Cleveland with that construction finished and readable. No matter how organized the surroundings are, it cannot hide itself. The operational ramifications are tangible for Shedeur Sanders. The lack of a perimeter receiver who commands enough defensive respect to compel true coverage commitment on the outside has been this offense's most enduring structural limitation. The kind of dedication that maximizes a quarterback's accuracy and willingness to attack tight windows by creating downstream space in the intermediate zones. Boston's physical presence and the route intelligence he brought with him create a coverage issue that this offense hasn't been able to produce in a long time. Now, Casey Concepcion and I want to fully present you with both sides of this because there are genuinely different conversations between the version that serves your comprehension of this player and the version that fits the narrative. The second one is the only one that interests me. The drops were an actual and serious issue. Drops in professional football are more than just statistical negatives that reset in between snaps, so I won't contextualize them away with minicamp caveats. They are psychological occurrences that have operational ramifications for the duration of a working relationship. There is friction between a quarterback and a receiver, with each uncaught catchable ball. Over the course of a season, friction subtly influences play calling and gradually erodes the particular operational trust a quarterback needs in a target in order to toss the ball to him when the game is on the line and the coverage is real. Concepcion's hands need to improve consistently. That is the main developmental obstacle he faces, and anything less explicit than that would be detrimental. However, it is an analytical failure in and of itself to reduce the entire conception picture to the drops conversation. A separate accounting is required by the route tape. His releases off the line of scrimmage were already being processed by him. Before his breaks came, the movement concepts were applied through the stems of his routes. The sharpness he was producing at the top of his cuts, real speed, not athleticism that can be read quickly by a defensive back. Not because his athleticism outpaced his defender, but rather because the route concept worked properly against the coverage he had read prior to the snap. There was a touchdown connection in those sessions where separation occurred. When projecting a professional ceiling, that distinction is very important. Compared to a receiver who gets open because he is faster than the man covering him, a receiver who gets open because the route worked correctly is making a very different statement about himself. The first shows how football intelligence is growing at a genuine rate. The second exhibits athleticism. The first category was consistently occupied by Concepcion's minicamp. His feet are already producing real developmental material for a coaching staff. Everything else must be caught up to by the hands. However, work that is based on a solid technical foundation is different and more promising than work that is built on top of nothing. When predicting this player's future, that distinction is crucial. Talon Green. Before some narrative building gains traction that the evidence is not warranted, I want to address this directly and plainly. The arm talent is real. A conventional pocket passer cannot structurally match the mobility dimension. His physical presence created real excitement that is worthy of recognition. And in addition to all of that, since an honest assessment necessitates holding both things at the same time, before the mechanical release can reliably withstand live professional pass rush, it must be gradually and patiently refined due to its length and looseness. A tight end was overthrown. He sailed throws past their intended targets on several different reps. Considering the circumstances, none of this is shocking and shouldn't raise any red flags. Because the ceiling is linked to a developmental timeline measured in years rather than months, Green was chosen in the 6th round. I want to be honest because I sense that some coverage is attempting to steal these little camp moments. This football team's starting quarterback position is not reopened by an encouraging throw in a no-contact walkthrough. Not a little, not in any right way. Green's physical toolkit is genuinely intriguing, and as a backup option, he may eventually develop into something worth keeping an eye on. However, on a team that has dedicated its entire organizational identity to a different quarterback, a 6th-round developmental player who is still converting raw physical talents into reliable professional execution is not going to have any meaningful conversations about the starting position. Cleveland is building this offense around Shedeur Sanders. Every important choice this organization has made since the start of the offseason reflects that conclusion. Not a single component of that architecture is touched by a single promising padless representative. Since this is the biggest real story coming out of Cleveland minicamp, and the one that is least likely to get significant analytical attention, this is where I want to spend actual time. Take a moment to look away from the individual pieces. Examine the organizational reasoning that unites them into a cohesive whole. Because something becomes apparent that individual evaluations are unable to capture when you take a far enough step back to view the construction as a whole rather than as a collection of distinct player evaluations. The absence of a boundary receiver, which has subtly limited this offense's potential for years, is directly addressed by Boston as a recognizable profile that arrives with clearly finished preparation work, rather than as a projection based on physical potential. Conception's sophisticated route processing and movement characteristics put pressure on coverage allocation in the intermediate zones that create operating space, particularly where Shedeur is proven to be the most precise and comfortable. Hundreds of millions of dollars have been purposefully invested in the rebuilt offensive line to provide a franchise quarterback with the protective infrastructure he needs to perform at his talent ceiling, rather than at the compromised survival level that an unstable front five forces on a quarterback, regardless of his skill level. These aren't opportunistic purchases that are kept together by scheme hope and dropped into open depth chart slots. They are targeted, intentional investments in an offensive strategy based on a specific quarterback's unique attributes, backed by the seriousness of a company that genuinely believes in what it is creating. When deliberate franchise construction is actually taking place, it looks like that. Additionally, it differs greatly from the transactional roster assembly that teams that are constantly in transition typically create. Every time with keep is acquired when they became available. On top, a scheme was applied. Every 2 or 3 years, the organization's identity is completely rebuilt. Cleveland does not appear to be an organization responding to its situation at this time. It appears as though someone is carrying out a plan that was developed well in advance of minicamp week, and the components that have arrived for this evaluation reflect that intention at a level of specificity that is genuinely hard to discount. The culture that is evident in these sessions has significance of its own and should be addressed explicitly. Early on in a rookie minicamp, one particular thing can be revealed with remarkable clarity. Who showed up expecting to create a first impression in real time while the evaluation was already underway, and who arrived with their preparation already ingrained in their technique. After 3 days of walkthroughs, a Cleveland coaching staff failed to install Boston's route intelligence on the first day. It was developed over the course of several months of solitary work, in settings where nothing was recorded and only the player was present, supported solely by his own reflection on the demands of this professional opportunity. The sophisticated movement of conception conveys the same message. Instead of viewing the time between draft night and the reporting date as a calendar gap, these players saw it as a true competitive window. Anyone who has watched enough football to distinguish between a player who arrived prepared and a talented player who arrived confident that talent alone would be sufficient can see that decision clearly and instantly on film. This is a clear assembly of the entire image. Enough oxygen has been consumed by the Watson situation. Anyone watching with sincere honesty can already see how it ends. The real story emerging from Berea this week is not the Talon Green narrative that some coverage segments wish to elevate above what the evaluation actually reveals. The true story is that receivers who arrived with preparation evident in their first routes wrote it down on that practice field. By rookies competing against players who know exactly what's on the line and what won't be given to anyone. Additionally, by a coaching staff building an offense around a quarterback whose unique qualities those construction choices are intended to serve and maximize. Not another year of shifting expectations in the direction of mediocrity. The real competitive window is always just out of reach, so there will be no more cycles of patience. A foundation is being constructed with a specific goal, supported by the investment necessary to make that goal a reality. Built around a quarterback who has earned every bit of it by putting in countless hours of practice when no one else was around. The assembly is more advanced and proceeding more quickly than the national discourse has acknowledged. In Cleveland, something real is being constructed. The answer will have been sitting in this miniature camp footage the entire time, waiting for someone to stop long enough to see it clearly. When October arrives and people are trying to explain what they are watching. Every development in this story arrives here first, so make sure you are subscribed and have the notification bell turned on. Post your opinions in the comments section right now. From Cleveland's minicamp, what caught your attention the most? Does Shedeur Sanders' organizational picture alter your perception of this offense's potential in 2026? Which member of this draft class are you most eager to see grow alongside him? Turn off the sound. I read it all. I'll see you at the next time.